the Green Thinkers Academy.
Everyone, welcome to Green Thinkers Academy. I am Ananya Chatterjee and I will be taking the concept of the environment. Okay, so today will be the first class, and in this today's class we will see the definition of the environment, then the basic structure of the environment, the types of environment and the factors that affect the environment. So let's start with today's lesson. First of all, what is environment? Well, environment is simply our surrounding, where all the biotic and the abiotic components are in constant interaction with each other so that they can sustain their lives. Okay. Now, what are these biotic component and the abiotic component? These biotic components are the living creatures, like we human beings come under this category. We, the human beings, the animals, the plants, the microorganisms, all the living components will come under the biotic component. Okay, and the abiotic are the non-living component, which helps in the sustaining life of for the biotic component. Okay, now this abiotic component will include the air, water, soil, all this. Okay, now let's see the basic structure of the environment. Here you can see in this diagram I have shown that environment is surrounded by the weather, climate, nature, disaster, natural resources, human beings. So one or the other way, all these six things, this climate, nature, all these affects the environment, and they sometimes modify the environment. Like we all know that nature is an integral part of this environment. Then we have the climate and weather. All these climate and weather, their minimal change also affects the environment. Similarly, we have the human beings. Okay, so in case of human beings, what happens? Human beings, they modify the environment. Natural resources determine the structure of the environment. Then we have disaster. Now the disasters also impact the environment. Okay, so all these six things, they actually forms as the basic structure for the environment. Now we have types of environment. So there are actually many types of environment, but here I will like to explain about the micro and the macro environment. Actually, this macro environment is defined for a large scale of environment, okay, and long-term environmental conditions that affect the organism. And the major external and uncontrollable factors comes under this. Now, these factors include the economic, demographic, social, even the natural forces also. And the macro environment is also termed as the general environment. But if you see the micro environment is also termed as the microhabitat, and it's a very small and a specific area in a habitat which is distinguished from its immediate surrounding by the factors like the amount of incident light, the degree of hotness and the degree of moisture. And also this microenvironment is termed as the nearby environment. Let's take an example for this. Suppose I am staying here. So the overall area of my house will come under the macro environment. Okay. But particularly this room where I am doing this video, this room is from where I am taking the class, this particular room will come under the micro environment. Okay. Actually, this is my nearby environment. Okay. Now we have the environmental factors. So here you can see there are mainly three factors that control the environment. First we have climatic, then we have edaphic, and finally we have physiographic or topographic. Now climatic factors include the climatic conditions like change in the climate, change in the degree of hotness, or anything which is related to the climate will come under this. We all know that climate of a place determines the quality of that environment. Okay, like we are living in the equatorial region, so this area is having an hot and humid type of climate. But if you go far away from this equator towards the poles, then you will find there dry and cold environment. Okay, so these are the basic things which actually determine the structure of the environment. Then we have the edaphic factor. Edaphic factor means the factors which is related to the soil. Okay, edaphic means the soil structure, or you can say which is comprised of the rocky structure, rocks. Okay, solid crustal rocks actually. So this edaphic factor or the soil factor is very important, because the area or the soil present in an area will determine the quality of the environment. Okay. Now physiographic or topographic. From here you can understand topographic means the elevation and the sea level, mean sea level. It is actually on the basis of the height and structure of the physiology. So if you take two types of environments, say suppose we are having a mountainous region and a plain valley. So both the area are different in their topography. One is at higher elevation and one is at lower elevation. So their environment will also depend based on that. Right. So these are the factors which actually determine the quality of the environment. Then we have the components of the environment. So as I have mentioned earlier about the biotic and abiotic components, here I have shown the same. Okay. So the components of environment is the biotic and abiotic. Now biotic components are the living components like we, the human beings, the animals, the plants, microorganism. From a single cell microorganism to a multi-cell animal or plant, it will be the biotic component. It will come under the biotic component. Okay, now abiotic components are the soil, air, water, temperature, humidity. All these will come under the abiotic component, which is actually helping in the maintaining or sustaining life for the biotic component. Now this abiotic component and the biotic component, they are always in interaction with each other. Like you can see, we actually breathe the air, right? So we are dependent on the air. Then we drink water, so we are also dependent upon the water. Similarly, if you take an example of an area of, say suppose a soil, okay, soil environment, so you will find that many microorganisms or microspecies, they live under the soil. In fact, rodents, snakes, all these type of creatures, they also live in the soil. Now we all know that bacteria, they helps in the fixation of the nitrogen into the soil. There are many other organisms which some or the other way helps in the maintenance of the soil fertility. Right. So all these things, the maintenance of the nutrient or the biogeochemical process, all these are occurring between the organism, that is from the biotic environment to the abiotic environment. So there is a constant flow between these two types of environment. Okay. Now we will see here hydrosphere, atmosphere and lithosphere. So it's given that interaction of the different components of the environment. So here you can see that hydrosphere. Hydrosphere, what do you understand by this? Hydro means water and sphere is the overall area that is consisting of the water. Then atmosphere is based on the air, and the lithosphere is of the soil or the rock structure of the earth. Okay. Now biosphere. Biosphere is that area where the organisms or the living or the biotic components are living and in constant interaction with these three. Okay. Now let's take an example. You will find that at a certain height of the atmosphere we find birds. Okay, so the region where the birds are flying in the atmosphere will come under the biosphere. Then if you go at a certain depth into the soil, you will find that there are rodents, snakes, ants, then we have worms living under the soil. So the area where the organisms are living into the lithosphere will come under the biosphere. Then another thing, hydrosphere. Hydrosphere, we all know that fishes and certain amphibians, they are living into the water, right, at a certain depth. So that portion where the fishes and some amphibians are living into the hydrosphere will come under the biosphere. So actually this biosphere is comprised of the living organisms that are in constant interaction with the atmosphere, hydrosphere and lithosphere. I hope today's lesson you have understood very nicely. If you have any doubt, then you can mail me. I have provided my mail ID over here, so you can contact me through my mail ID. And the second thing is that in the next class I will be taking the lithosphere. So the spheres which I have mentioned here, I will come with close interaction with that. Okay, so all the spheres I will mention very nicely here. Okay, so next class will be on the lithosphere. I hope you will understand that also very nicely. So thank you.
The Green Thinkers Academy.